Hey, Cody Libolt here, and I'm trying again to see if we can get the connection to work on Facebook Live. So let me message Greg real fast, let him know what we're doing. All right, well, hey, here he is. It says can't bring on camera. I don't know why that would be. Sorry, Greg, it's not letting me go on camera. Maybe you could try, I don't know, if you have any other ideas. Not sure what we could do there. Ah, here we go. That may work. Loading.
Gotcha.
Here we are.
You hear me? Okay, perfect. So I think we got to rename some of these videos. Greg and Cody have technical difficulties.
Yeah. I think maybe Apple should buy Facebook and fix this problem.
I don't use Apple. I don't hate myself enough to use iPhone.
Well, let me just point out that I've never had this problem with somebody who's using an iPhone.
Oh, okay then. Okay. Touché.
So how's your day? What's new with you? Your
I guess
video's
we'll start from the top with everything. Nothing else. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
okay.
I just lost you, but you're back.
Actually, okay. You know what, Lord? We pray for the technology to work this time. Pray for the time for Cody and I to talk, and pray for all of our listeners that, they can be touched and, maybe hear part of your word. In your name, Lord, amen. All right. Maybe that'll work now.
Whether it works or not, I believe God will bless it.
I hope so. Yeah. I mean, we can't bribe the Lord with prayer, but he does bless our prayers.
Mm-hmm.
So, but actually on that note, I've actually been doing really good. Like I was for a while kind of in a spiritual funk, as people who are a little closer to me know, as you personally know. And then yesterday I actually watched there's a documentary called The Case for Christ.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, actually not the documentary. Well, so there's the documentary from way back when, but
yeah, there's the recent kind of fictionalized story version of that. I've lost you.
Can you hear me all right?
Oh, you're back.
Okay. Whoops. I thought that was a refresh button that was for seeing my messy desktop. Anyway, so yeah, I was watching it, and it's really interesting because they talked a lot. You basically had Lee Strobel's how he started out as, for those of you who don't know who let me take a step back. Those of you who don't know who Lee Strobel is, he was a award-winning journalist in Chicago. Very much an atheist, very much all about the facts, very much all about what can I see, what can I touch. And if I can't see it, I can't touch it, then it's probably not real.
Mm-hmm.
And as somebody who has a scientific background, like I can respect that. But then again, I can't see the base pairs in DNA.
Okay.
So it's like I can test for them, I can build evidence for them, but they're not something you can see directly. It's not, even so. A lot of what we know in molecular biology is stuff we know indirectly. It's stuff we know from taking a lot of clues and putting it together. Like nobody has ever really seen the glycolysis pathway. Mm-hmm. You can't look through a microscope and see all the little enzymes, doing their thing. It's done very indirectly is how we learn these things. And so with him being a journalist, he set out to disprove Christianity because his wife had become a Christian. He's like, well, this is nuts. This is stupid. And she's like, well, I feel it. It's true. And of course, we've talked, you guys have talked before on the podcast about, well, you don't know something's true just by feeling and just by emotion. And I think there is kind of there is something to say about the experience of Christianity. Like you see the changes in other people's lives, you see the change in your own life, but that goes beyond feeling. And so it was kind of interesting because you could really relate. I could really relate to both characters, where it's like she's like, "Well, it's true. I feel it. God's changed me from the inside, and I'm sensing this, and it's so, I can, she's almost like she could taste it." And um, Lee is like, "No, that's just emotion. You can't know things based on just emotion." And I think that I would say you kind of need both. Like, Paul Washer said that if you came into a church service one day and said, "Sorry, I'm late. On my way in, I was walking on."
I haven't heard this story. I wonder, wonder why we keep losing the connection. So I want to know what happened with Paul Washer. This reminds me of like a Monty Python skit. This would make a really good one. Like the guy who... Are you there? Like the guy who has to keep on filling in the blanks or something. I saw this one Monty Python where it was like the guy who always over-explains or something. And he was like, "So you're the guy who always over-explains?" He's like, "Yep." Like, "All right, so tell me about how that came about." And the guy's like, it just becomes some more absurd like that. Well, Greg, if you can jump back in, you should jump back in, and I'll be waiting. At least until the kids start waking up. Kids are at their nap time right now. So the overall promise of this video was that we were going to talk about, has the world gone mad? And it's a lot easier to have that kind of conversation when it is a conversation. Now I'm just like, okay, I'll just try and fill in the blanks. Has the world gone mad? Yes. Okay, so if you've ever followed my Facebook page at all in the last month, you'll know that I think that there was not a strong case for Roy Moore, the Senate candidate from Alabama, being guilty of any of the things that anybody accused him of. And I saw the National Review, I saw many of the people at the ERLC and other places that I actually do respect, as opposed to the National Review. I saw many conservatives, including Eric Erickson, trashing the man's reputation. And it made me really frustrated because I didn't think that they had basis for that. Maybe they know something I don't, but they sure haven't explained it if they do. Tragedy that Roy Moore lost because it's going to, as Doug Wilson pointed out, it's going to paint a target on the back of every conservative, because conservatives are much less likely, I think that conservatives are the party, the group that believes in God more than liberals. They're not going to go spreading lies against the other side. At least not nearly as many of them would. But the other side has no problem spreading lies about conservatives. Also, the other side doesn't claim to follow a moral code, but conservatives do. When I say moral code, I mean in regard to sexual behavior. Their moral code, when it exists, is a lot more broad, a lot more accepting of behaviors. So they're able to call out conservatives as being hypocrites because conservatives claim to hold to a narrow view. So it just puts us on an unlevel playing field when you have a situation in which people can make accusations and those accusations are taken to be true on the basis of very little other than just I say so. And that's the issue. So that's got me frustrated. The whole Roy Moore thing is sad, and it's sad from the point of view of like what happens when Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz get accused of something next. This doesn't have the potential to bring down someone like Trump, who actually has, as far as I can tell, said some very disrespectful things about women, and including divorcing two of his past wives. It's not going to hurt someone like Trump. It's going to hurt someone like Ted Cruz, who's been, as far as I understand, faithfully married for more than a dozen years. and they're going to go after him. They're going to go after, I don't know who else. There's not that many heroes left. Ben Sass or David Ratt or a couple other people that I think are really great as far as their vision for the country. Those people are going to be vulnerable. It's not going to be hard to take them down, especially when you've got half of your own party or more just ready to stab you in the back. It points to a need for a new party. The Republican Party is no longer a vessel for conservatism, and the sooner people discover that, the better. If you want to get good insights on that question, I'd go to Steve Deace, I think is how you pronounce it. Deace? I don't know. Deace. He's been useful. Robert Gagnon on Facebook. I love reading his stuff. I'm always interested in what Doug Wilson says. Grain of salt, but I'm always interested, and he always says it well. Then there's somewhat interested in what Red State and the Resurgent, now known as the Maven, say. Somewhat interested in ERLC, the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission of the Southern Baptist Convention. They have a lot of really good publications, really high quality, although I don't always agree with their worldview. I'm just trying to recommend, how would you apprise yourself of these issues? There's Ben Shapiro, The Daily Wire, excellent commentary, not always right. In the case of Roy Moore, he was on the opposite side from me on that issue. Well, I'm not seeing Greg jumping back on. I'll fill up a little bit more space. I'll just talk about my ideas. There's a lot of other things that you could say about the world, about how the world has gone mad than just one single election. Oh, here he is. Let's see if I can get him back on this. Just pressing to add him.
There we go. Can you see me?
Yeah, I do. So I'll fill.
Hey, every time it kicks me off, it looks like you have to send me the invite again.
You know what happened was I didn't see anything from you, and then I saw a little red thing that popped up that said Greg would like to join. Did you send a request?
No.
Because I got a notification that you were wanting to join.
Yeah, it didn't give me anything until just now, and just a second ago.
And then it gave you the option, and then you click something, or how's that work?
It gave me a little thing that jumped on that had a picture of two people, like iconographic picture of two people. It said, "Hey, join Cody's call." Other than that, all it was giving me was the emojis. So I kept hitting the like button. So we were seeing maybe the like stuff pop up.
I wasn't seeing. I wasn't even seeing the likes.
Oh man, Messenger.
What about it?
If it kicks me off again, I'll let you know on Messenger. Anyway, Paul Washer. So I'll let you, yeah, it's, I don't know what's going on, but I'm out here. I'm back in the I'm in the living room because it'll be a little closer to the Wi-Fi.
Cool.
Basically, Paul Washer's story. He talked about, if a guy came into church, said I've been hit by a 16-wheeler. Nobody would believe him. They say, no, if you got hit by a 16-wheeler, you'd be changed. And it's the same thing. It's like if we come to God, we become born again, we're going to be changed. We're going to be different from how we were before, because you can't be hit by something so large and not be changed. And he was talking about that in context of somebody who's a carnal Christian. Now, obviously, we have times of backslidings in our lives that sometimes happen. But he was talking about, like, hey, if you become saved, if you become born again, and 5 years later you're living exactly the way you were the day before you got saved, chances are you're probably not saved. I can't remember so let's talk about, like, with experiential stuff. And so, like, I watched Lee Strobel, and it was just really amazing because, like, hey, watching The Case for Christ, it's like, hey, I know Jesus is real partly because I've personally changed, and also because of the amazing amount of historical evidence. And so, yeah. Hey, David, I am live in front of apparently six people online are watching right now. Want to say hi? All right. So it's it was some interesting stuff. And then I was also reading the audiobook today for quite a bit, and I was like, wow, this is really something. Um, I've read it before, but it is interesting to look at it. But anyway, back to what we were going to talk about
Well, I was
originally.
asking how you were
Um,
doing, and that you told me
yeah.
this thing about Lee Strobel, but what was the connection there?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. The what this is why Cody's great because he keeps the conversation organized. Um, Basically, I was in a real spiritual funk, and I was like, you know what? This is helpful to see this because um, I think that God had me going through a season of testing, and I didn't even really know what was going on. Where I was feeling like really miserable and just not happy with the way my life is. And I'll say I'm not totally out of the woods yet, um, because like there are things that I would like to improve. Um, but it was interesting to watch this and have people verbalize spiritual issues they were having that were really what was going on inside of me, and then having other people talk about it
Hmm.
and respond as well. And
Gotcha.
so sometimes yeah, so sometimes God just has a way of getting
Hmm.
to you. Like with me, one of my big things is I really want to be in a research lab. I really want to be doing real scientific work. And right now I'm in a specimens processing lab, so it's not really very sciencey. It's not really, as far as I know, it's not really building my
Hmm.
resume. So it's kind of like I really want to be in that a real lab doing real research. Not that I don't appreciate where I'm at now. It's just that I really want to be somewhere better. As I think is kind of the plight of people who are 20 somethings before they finally manage to land that dream job in their 30 somethings.
There's a verse that I'm
But
looking up in 1 Corinthians 7, and it really bears on what you're
mhm,
saying. Were were you a slave when you were called? Don't let it trouble you. Although if you can gain your freedom, do so. There was a friend of mine, uh, I'll just call him M, that was talking with me the other day and saying like, I'm doing this and it's working, but I really want to do that. And some people are saying I should just keep doing
mhm.
what I'm already doing because it's working, but I really want to do this. And his heart was in the other thing. His heart wasn't in what he's currently doing. So, I shared with him that verse, and the idea being that uh, you should better your situation. And in the meantime, you should seek to glorify God in the situation you're in. And maybe you find out what God's will for you is by trying to better yourself. And if you get promoted, you get promoted. And if you don't, you don't. But either way, you are in the hand of God.
Thank you. I think that's I never thought of that verse that way. It never occurred to me to think of it that way because like I thought like I think I always read it as very surface level and very I hate to use the word literal because that term is so misused. But I guess a very literal way
Mm-hmm.
where it's like, hey, if you're a slave, you can serve God even though you're a slave. But I think I didn't really realize, there's kind of that in between on the socioeconomic
Mm-hmm.
ladder, where not everybody is either a slave or a rich or like a
Mm-hmm.
king. There's some in between there, and it kind of applies to all the other rungs, where hey, maybe you're a king and you don't want to be a king, or maybe you're a regular guy and you don't want to be where you're at. And if you're hearing a noise in the background, it's my dog drinking her water. Um, so I don't know how loud that is. Um, but that's really amazing thought there. Like I never thought of it that way.
Yeah, there's something for you whether you get promoted or not in that verse.
Mhm.
Don't let
Oh
it
yeah,
trouble
big
you.
time.
Man, that's hard.
I think it's also important. Maybe there's also verses about not letting the world trouble us because like the we're as we're going to talk about like it's amazing you can't turn on the TV these days without somebody saying that ice cream is racist or whatever. Um, and you can't even parody parody it anymore because people have said that milk is racist, that opening a taco joint is racist. People and these are actual things that have actually happened. Like two people who went to Mexico, got authentic recipes, came back to the United States, opened a taco stand. These SJWs ended up forcing them to have to shut down their taco stand.
Social justice warriors, for anybody that's not heard one of our favorite terms.
How have you not heard social justice warrior on Facebook? But yeah, so
do you have Chewbacca with you there?
No, go away. You want to say hi, Shane?
Oh, hi there.
Hey, David, can you put the dog out? Sorry. David! All right. Here. We'll put you outside. No, actually, here, go see Davies. So, yeah, I'm putting the dog in with you. Shayna, go see Davies. Or can you put the dog out? There we go. There we go. So, social... Yeah, so, I mean, the one you and I really talked about as you prompted me when we tried to do this video the first time, you have it where Ben Carson has been accused of being a white supremacist. Like Ben Carson's as black as you get. Like you don't get much blacker than he is. You know, both in terms of skin tone and in terms of, you know, he grew up in, I think it was downtown Detroit, tried to stab his mom at one point, you know, grew up to a single mother. And, you know, he grew up to a mother who was determined to make sure her kids were successful. You know, she decided, you know what, they're not going to watch TV except for one show a day, and it's going to be the show that I pick. If you ever see the movie Gifted Hands, it's quite amazing. Seen it. And he even had you have not seen Gifted Hands? Oh, shoot, you got to see this. It's with, I think, Cuba Gooding Jr., the guy from Snow Dogs. You know, he played the older Ben Carson in it. But, you know, they show in the movie about how he pioneered this way to separate conjoined twins who are conjoined, like, at the head, like with brain tissue connecting. And also they showed, like, when he was a teenager, you know, he kind of had a bit of a thug, you know, phase where he was thinking, okay, this is the way to be a man. And he tried to stab somebody, and the knife broke. And it's like, he's like, thank God that knife broke, because if the blade hadn't broken off that knife, I would have been in jail. Instead, he ended up becoming the greatest pediatric neurosurgeon in the world. And of course, what does the left do? They accuse him of being a white supremacist. And at some point, you got to say that there's a phrase I've heard before, that some people are too dumb to breathe. I don't know if you ever heard that one before. It was the phrase, either people are too dumb to breathe or they're almost too dumb to breathe. And yeah, I had it where somebody recently told me, you know, don't say that people are idiots. And I'm like, you know, you got to be cordial with people. Like, you don't, even if somebody is incredibly stupid, you don't just call them stupid to their face. Usually, but you know, so I always try to figure out, okay, as a Christian, you know, Jesus says, you know, don't call your brother a fool, or you'll be in danger of the fires of hell. So it's like, you always wonder what is the balance there, but at the same time, it seems biblical. Like Proverbs kind of assumes that we'll recognize a fool versus a wise person.
Yeah, you know, it's kind of funny because actually when I was waiting for you to jump back on the call, I talked about that just a couple minutes ago because I was like, what's something I could talk about? And it was a conversation that I've been having with somebody else on my Facebook feed, so I just read some really good responses from
smart person or not so smart.
So these are both smart people.
I guess okay. I realized after I asked that, I was like, wait, that's kind of a loaded question if they're not smart people. All right, go ahead and read some. Oh, wait, unless you...
I already did. I think that... Yeah, I have an article at
Awesome.
CodyLibolt.com that talks specifically about that. It's how to criticize
Nice.
others while maintaining humility. So you could find that.
I would love to read
Yeah, I'll
this.
probably just go in the comments afterward, and I'll just drop in the link so anybody can see it. So let's talk about
Perfect.
the
Perfect.
bigger picture. Has the world gone mad? To fill you in, when I
Yeah.
was waiting for you, there was a couple of minutes where I talked about my thoughts on Roy Moore. So we don't really have to cover that ground again,
Mhm.
but I'm sure there's plenty of other ground to cover.
I saw that you were covering it, and I caught a few seconds of it here and there, and it sounded like you were really nailing
Thanks.
it. And it does remind me, like, I know, like, there's crazy stuff out there. There was, like, the Antifa guy who stabbed a horse in the neck because he said the horse is racist. There was people calling Ben Shapiro, who's Orthodox Jew, a neo-Nazi. It's like, it seems like people are just calling whatever bad thing they are that's the opposite of whatever they are. Like, they're going to accuse me and you of being in the Black Panthers or something.
I think that's
Um,
just they're so illiterate
they,
historically is the issue that they wouldn't even know what a Nazi
Mhm.
is, and I mean they wouldn't know that Nazis were socialists. That's somehow lost on them.
Yeah. The National Socialist Workers Party, or the fascism is exactly what
Hmm.
Antifa is. But anyway, you had a more important. You were going to take this to a higher level. The conversation a second ago.
About what?
With the whole has the world.
Has the world gone mad? Actually, I didn't have anything in particular in mind that I remember. I may have lost my memory of it. The issue is I have two young kids, so I'm a little impaired as far as my concentration skills lately. I'm looking up that link. So if you're on watching this right now, cheers. Thanks for doing that. And hopefully Greg will jump back on in just a second. We've been having technical difficulties. So how to maintain humility. Wow, I've got a lot of articles that start with how to. Gonna have to type the actual. Oh, that's it. How to criticize while maintaining humility. I'll just drop that link over in the feed and see if I can do that right now. Boom, there it is. Well, I'm waiting for Greg, and I'm going to mess around a little bit, press some buttons maybe. Does that work? Hey, he says he's loading. So while he's loading, maybe I can look for some other interesting comments from other friends and read some of what other people have said. Got this one from Randy. He says, patience and long suffering are all part of growing in the faith. Men do not have their most productive years until they are in their 40s. Blessings in Christ, keep the faith. That's really encouraging, both to me and to Greg, because we're both in our 30s, and it's quite a thing to create a life, and then to try and let that life glorify God, and to do it without going crazy. There's a lot of things that can make you feel like you're going crazy. Just the amount of things you have to keep up with, for one. So let's see. Huh. Randy suggested a good topic. What he suggested was dangers of the presumption of guilt until proven innocent, or that would be like a policy. So, I mean, no rational legal order has that as a policy. Guilty until proven innocent, but that's unfortunately what our political system and what our media system are leaning toward recently. Let's see what we got here. Oh, my friend Dan says that was a good answer, but does Trump lead many people to excuse many conservatives to defend or excuse bad behavior? I'm not sure if I understand the question. So does Trump lead people to excuse conservatives to defend bad behavior? Maybe if you get a chance, if you see the rest of this video, drop a comment, and I will. If I understand the question better, I might be able to give a better answer. But I think what you're asking is what's the effect that Trump has on conservatives? Unfortunately, the effect is that we've just branded conservatives as being the party that hates women, or Republicans more generally. But that's so sad, because many people who have a biblical moral worldview are those that are most standing up for the rights of women, including the ones that haven't been born yet, and including standing up against the kind of abuses that we see in Hollywood, standing up against all kinds of things. Now, obviously, there are hypocrites among those who call themselves conservatives, but it's really sad when you brand conservatives as being, the abusers. It's just not true. And it's really cheap rhetorically to basically say, we're the party that stands for women's health, and we're the party that stands for children's well-being. And it's like, come on, unless you're insane, unless you're a total creep, you do believe in women's health, and you do believe in children's well-being. And so the question is simply just, well, how do you define that? How do you understand that? How do you achieve that? So, all right, let's see. Greg's coming back on again. We'll give this probably try number 5 or 6. I don't know what's going on lately, but maybe when net neutrality is ended, things will change, because then data providers will be able to do streaming services more effectively, because they won't be required to give the same consistency of streaming to all sources. They'll be able to differentiate between the needs of video versus the needs of programming downloads or whatever that can be packaged and parceled out. So I just see him loading. So I'm just going to wait. Looking for some other comments, see if anybody's got anything that I have missed. Okay, so here's another no answer from the live video guest. Greg, you might need to try again. Here's another question from Dan. And so Dan asked if I support the other controversial comments of Roy Moore, and that's a fair question. Roy Moore was asked something along the lines, and I've only read this once, and it was a couple days ago, so I'm not prepared to quote him, but it was something along the lines of, when was the last time America was good? And he said it would have been like 150 years ago or more, or something like that. And I think that Roy intended to say, to answer a different question than what it sounded like was being asked. So there was a huge turning point around the time of the Civil War and right after it, where the United States was, it was treated as being the United States plural, and then it became treated as the United States is a thing, a singular thing. And from the perspective of somebody who cares about the Constitution and somebody who's a judge, that's a major turning point in the character of the nation, because we went from being a republic to being more and more a democracy. And that legal issue, and how you understand the 9th and 10th Amendments, and reinterpreting the Constitution to not be a limit on the federal power, but to be a limit on states' power, that was a huge turning point, and he may have been referring to that. If he was referring to that, then looking at the governmental structure of the United States, the last time the United States was anything close to what the Founding Fathers wanted it to be would have been 150 years ago or more. But I think that he gave the impression that he was saying that Americans were virtuous people back in the time when some white Southerners held slaves, which would be kind of a sad thing to say, not very politically correct. I don't know how he would back up that assertion. I think that if you look at the statistics, crime or vice or people's character, there's always been a mix. From the beginning of our country and long before it, there's always been a mix. There was never a golden age. So it was a gaffe, and I don't know how he wants to explain that gaffe. The other comment that was considered to be strange, I don't remember what it was. So if somebody wants to remind me. He had some other controversial comment. But then Dan also asked another question about Roy Moore. So let me skip to that one because I don't remember his other comments. So it was, I didn't engage with you during this election, the Senate thing, but now that it's over, why were you so dismissive of his accusers? So I believe in objectivity as a standard. It means self-responsibility for what you believe. It means you don't believe something because somebody said so unless you can see it with your own eyes. There's a scene in Atlas Shrugged where Dagny, who is one of the heroes, gets taken to another place that she's never been. Hang on, I just got a little note saying, can I send an invite? Boop. Okay, I've sent an invite. She gets taken to a place she's never been. And her guide says, I want you to see it. And she says, tell me, how did you do this? How does this all work? And he says, just see it and decide for yourself how it is. And that's self-responsibility, independence of judgment, requires as a standard that before I believe some claim, I'm not just going to weigh in and say these top 13 people who I respect all agree. That's not sufficient. So I don't care what David French of what used to be an organization that provided news and commentary called the National Review, I don't care what he says, if he can't point me to some reason why I should see it with my own eyes. Same thing with Ben Shapiro, and same thing with others. What I do know is that the accusers lacked credibility as far as their own personal history and character, as far as the kind of claims that they were making and the timing that they were making them. And what I do know is that one of the most wicked organizations in all of history, the Democratic National Convention, had a vested interest in paying people to do exactly what I saw people doing. And what I do know is that the second most wicked organization in all of history, I'm speaking hyperbolically, of course, the GOP, also has a vested interest in getting rid of somebody like Moore, who is a very strong social conservative and an embarrassment to Mitch McConnell, an embarrassment to many. It's like Ted Cruz on steroids, right? So I have every reason to be doubtful of the kinds of claims that I was seeing made against Roy Moore. But my concern was not to defend Roy Moore. My concern was to defend objectivity, to defend the fact that you should not draw conclusions until you see reason and basis. So, and I'm pressing the button again to get Greg back in the call, see if I can get him in. So, what I was mostly frustrated with was not what was happening to Roy Moore, because I don't know enough about his situation. What I was frustrated with was the kinds of arguments I was seeing from National Review, from Eric Erickson, from Al Mohler, Russell Moore. These are people that I read and like, Ben Shapiro. And their arguments never tied back to a source or an argument that was sufficient for me to see with my own eyes that there was even a case to be made.
Yes, I'm on.
Hey, Greg. Okay, hang on just a second. Yeah, let me wrap up. I had a question
Can you hear me?
I was covering. So
Go for it. I was
Okay.
actually watching you using a different account, partly. And so I'll message you with my other Facebook
You don't
account.
you don't want to talk about that.
If we get disconnected, I'll message you on that. Yeah. No, well, I don't mind letting people know, like, hey, like my GS Muse account, this is my pen name, this is not my real name. I go by Greg on the internet. But I also, do have another I also have a real name and a Facebook account for who I am personally. That's, more for like friends and family. But anyway, finish up the thing about Roy Moore. You were on a roll.
You have to be able to show people why the claim you're making is true. Mm-hmm. And if they wanted to search it out more deeply, give a link, give a source, give another any kind of thing that would allow me to research the issue. And they weren't doing that. But what they were doing was, in the case of some, like, for example, National Review is the thing that I had the strongest issue with, was because for weeks before the election and before the accusations came out, National Review had been running piece after piece hitting Roy Moore, saying he's just not the guy we need, not the guy we need. We don't like him. And then all of a sudden, when they came out with this whole, like, the accusations thing, they're like, oh, see, we knew it was true. We knew he was a wicked man. And I could just tell that they were bought in to the idea that he was a bad person, and they wanted to tell that story about him being bad.
Yeah.
And the worst that I saw, and I unfriended her and him on Facebook, would be Nancy and David French, and blocked them, because I saw Nancy give an article where she says, I've been abused in the past, and therefore I know that Roy Moore is guilty. That was the article. And I was disgusted, and I'm never going to talk to those two people again, because she said that and because he defended that. So
yeah, that's too much, because like, especially when you have, I'm not going to say that, you know, I don't think there's any such thing as somebody who's unbiased. Like, I think that if you, like, I have relatives who watch, you know, CNN, PBS, all of this, and, you know, they think that what they're watching is unbiased. You know, meanwhile, CNN, you know, came out with a Nothing Burger video where they admitted they made up the whole Trump-Russia conspiracy thing.
So to make it worse, what happens the day after Moore loses the election? National Review goes on with an article, which I skimmed because I don't read their articles anymore. But they go on with an article that's something like, Roy Moore does the impossible. He manages to lose an election as a Republican in Alabama. Oh, they're making fun of him. But it's like, don't you realize that you just slandered him for the last 4 weeks straight? And you just got exactly the outcome that you wanted, and now you're putting it on him? Creeps. Jonah Goldberg,
I hope they
Kevin
read what
Williamson,
they say.
David French,
it's
retire
like,
and close your
if
accounts.
You're going to slander.
If we can't have honest conservatives, and I don't think they are conservatives for one, but they're certainly not honest. And it's a personal disappointment to me, because I've read them for a long time.
See, it's surprising to me that, like, you and I, because you and I, you know, we don't like nonsense. You know, there's other terms I could use, but I'm trying to be polite. That there's you and I don't like this stuff, and you know, you and I are about truth. So it's surprising that, you know, there hasn't been like a hole torn in the space-time continuum with you and I meeting. You know, because it really. I really appreciate it, because then it shows, like, hey, you know, maybe I'm not crazy. There's somebody else who thinks like me too. Like I had it before where friends would tell me, well, I know that this person is a bad person that I've never met before. Well, how do you know? Well, because I'm black. And I'm like I didn't realize that people of a particular ethnicity all have like this magic telepathy together. And so it was like, I saw one, it was a hit piece. I don't know if you've seen this. Michelle Malkin Investigates. It was her first 2 episodes of her show. She talked about this. An officer named Daniel something or other, he, quote unquote biracial officer, and I don't like the term race, but go with it for now. Half Asian, half white, and he's accused of being this white supremacist who's out raping people. You know, he was accused, and like the people who, like, you see this guy, he's a good-looking guy. Like, if he wanted to have ladies come over to his apartment, he would have no trouble. And yet you had this, you know, woman who was old enough to be his mother, you know, who was, everybody acknowledged as a drug addict, who was approached by investigators saying, hey, did this guy molest you? She's like, no, nobody's ever molested me. And then they prompted her, and she was like, oh yeah, totally. And so she went along with it, and it's like, are you crazy? And like, they had like people on video giving their testimony where they're telling the cops, oh yeah, he lifted up my shirt and all of this stuff. And, you know, then they didn't know the camera was still rolling, and they're telling the officer, and telling these other police officers, She's like, well, yeah, even if he didn't, rape somebody, then at least I was able to help out. And it's like, so people
Yeah.
were admitting on camera that they were making the whole thing up. And as far as I know, this guy is still in jail, even though anybody with more than half a brain cell can see what's going on. And so it's like, I don't care who somebody is. I don't care if it's I don't care who you are. I don't care what you've done. It's like the crime needs to fit reality.
Mm.
It needs to fit the facts. Like, we have to actually know if somebody committed a crime or not. You don't just accuse somebody of being a child molester or a white supremacist or whatever because you don't like their political views. And as you kind of, and it's like, what the left is really, and, those, it seems like this is starting to creep into the right. You don't, with this Roy Moore situation, it's like, you don't just accuse somebody of something.
Yeah.
Like,
And
that's not how truth
if
works.
you see 100 other people that are so sure, that's not evidence. Other people being sure is evidence that you might want to look at the case, but it's not evidence that the case that they think is true is true.
Yeah. What's that thing in Israel they have? It's like
Haven't
the
heard of it.
10th man rule or the 9th man rule or something. Have you heard of this? It was in World War Z.
It's a cool
Now,
movie. I love
as
that
much
movie.
as World War Z sounds like a, oh dude,
Okay.
oh yeah, it was in the movie. The book was way better, and I know people say that about every book, but I read the book and I was like, they should make a movie out of this. I'm reading it through
Nice.
for the third time. That's how good it is. Like, the guy knows his culture, he knows his history, he knows his the book has a very different premise. It's a guy going around the world interviewing people 10 years after the zombie war ends or is declared to be over. And the zombie war itself lasted for
Cool.
10 years. So he's basically a historian going around recording people's stories. But with Israel, the one thing Israel was
Right.
the only country that prepared for the zombie war. And the reason they did was because you had it where you had 10 people around a table, 9 of them said, obviously zombies aren't a thing, this is stupid. But because of what happened in the Holocaust, because Jews said, no, that can't happen, the government would never do that to us, it's the duty of the 10th man to disagree with the other 9 and to dig deeper. And if he doesn't find anything, dig deeper. And
That's
you
cool.
just keep digging
I remember
till
a
he finds
reference to
something.
that in the movie. I just know what it was.
It's really a good principle because, like, I see that in science where, for those who don't know, my background is my bachelor's degree is in biotechnology and molecular bioscience. So I study DNA, I study cells, I study biology on the smaller scale. And so
I lost you. If I could guess where Greg was planning to go. I actually don't have a very good guess because I don't know enough about the subject. So, let's see.
can you hear me?
I hear you. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
No,
Am I
you're good.
upside down?
Yeah.
Can you see me? Yeah. I guess we'll keep going a bit, and then I'll probably get going. I told a friend that I would meet up with him, and it's unfortunate that we're having all these technical difficulties. This image on my phone is actually upside down right now. That's how
looks good here.
Strange it is. Anyway, I'm sure we'll get these bugs figured out. But yeah, so as somebody with background in the life sciences, evolution is basically worshipped, and you see that a lot. And I talk about that on my videos. I know that you'll probably have people who are like diehard believe in evolution, like, well, maybe God used evolution. There's a lot of things that people say or believe, but I'm somebody who has the scientific background. I grew up more agnostic than Christian. So I grew up believing in evolution. It was, because of studying that I really said, hey, this these ideas have a lot more holes in them than I realized. And there's another explanation that makes more sense that I ended up changing my way of thinking. But I have to make sure that when I go for a PhD, that I don't let that hint, I don't let that slip, that I make sure not to say that, because
and they don't want it,
heretical words. And exactly. Evolution is really the sacred cow in the life sciences. But anyway, back to, I guess, truth in general. As you and I, have talked about like Black Lives Matter before, it's like, I think that was one of the big things with, Has the World Gone Mad? I can see why people might think differently about things. I can see why, like, even if I don't agree with somebody, or if I think, they're way, way off in the deep end, you can kind of see why they would think that. You can see why they would be fooled into thinking a particular way. But with Black Lives Matter, I mean, what you have is an organization that goes around blocking traffic so that, black people can't get to work, burning down black communities, and, saying outright lies. So like the case of Michael Brown, who's famous for hands up, don't shoot. Like, even the Obama administration acknowledged that hands up, don't shoot was a lie. Like, they know that that's not true. Eric Holder's Justice Department, Eric Holder, African-American, head of the Department of Justice under the Obama administration, even he, investigated the case of Michael Brown, and said, that this hands up, don't shoot thing doesn't fit with the evidence. And these are liberal, far left socialist Democrats. They're not, last I checked, Barack Obama doesn't have KKK membership. He's not out, as much as I don't like Obama, as much as there's a lot that I don't like about him. Are you going to say that he's out there, in bed with this conspiracy to kill black people?
Yeah.
And then push for more left-wing policies and want to give the government more power? Because that's the thing that, with Black Lives Matter doesn't make a lot of sense, is they'll be opposed to police body cams, and they'll say, well, police are being unjust, therefore we're going to go burn down Kiki's hair salon. It's like,
yeah. And if you ever go to the the leaders of Black Lives Matter, like if you go to their website, blacklivesmatter.com, you can see what they believe, and you can read quotes from them. And these are not people that have the interests of black people in mind. They're just not. So let's, there's one other thing I wanted to ask you about today, because I know you said you had to go. There's been 40 shares on our video. How did that happen? Do you have a friend that whenever he sees you go on, he just spams like every Facebook page or something?
Yeah, me, but it wasn't me this time. People are being very kind to us right now. Thank you, whoever doing this.
Except for
thank you so much.
It was Michael Dry. Do you know him?
Maybe. Like, I know people by face.
Sorry.
I feel like a jerk now because he's gonna, like, he just did this amazing thing for us.
Well, he's a friend of mine, so he might not be
remembering the name.
So he shared our video to, like, check this out: Southern Survivalists, Conservative America, Stop Bernie Sanders 2016, Believers in Yeshua, United in Jesus Christ, President Trump, Confederate Flag Rally. I'm not sure I want to be there. World 24 Monitor, Trump 2020, Christian State of International Soldiers. I don't know what this is. Donald Trump Superstar, twice. Ted Cruz, Conservative Stalwart, official Hillary is awful page, but that's not exactly the way he said it. Ohio supports libertarian.
I would love to hear.
So here's the thing: is most groups do not want you to share a live video in their group. I manage a couple of groups, and I'm just going to say, please don't share groups, share our videos in groups. Share
Can
videos
you hear
in
me?
places that you own, not in places that other people own. Because I don't want my name associated with being spammy. And sharing something in 40 places simultaneously is spammy. I'm thankful for the intention, but choose one or two, please.
You share my videos anywhere you guys want. I actually Facebook has it now where they don't I don't even get in trouble for
You don't get in trouble?
basically sharing the same video in 40 groups anymore.
Hmm.
No, I Facebook's fine with it.
No.
Because I share in groups that things are relevant to. So like when my Amazon book came out,
Mm-hmm.
the Dark Swim one, which is just a short story. My full novel is not out yet. Um, there's I joined like every group on Facebook that was like free, promote your book.
Mm-hmm.
That was for that purpose, and I shared it. And then I share, but I share to groups that are relevant, that want to hear that sort of thing. And I also try not to be
Yeah.
violate terms of particular
Yeah.
groups. Like
Yeah.
some
Yeah.
groups
You
don't
want to
like
read
it
the
if you
rules on
post
their
in
groups.
notes. But exactly, because I also don't want them to report me to Facebook saying that I'm violating their
Oh,
group
that was
rules.
actually it. I just
Anyway,
wanted to
you
ask
were
you
going
if
to
you had
ask me
any
something
idea
else.
why it is that whenever you and I have gone on videos, especially, we get all these shares. I think you've got some well-connected friends.
Uh, Probably. Um, there's also let's see. I feel like we gotta have one more thing before we close
All
out. We
right.
gotta have at least one more.
Okay.
I feel like we can't leave on that. You got another question for me? But actually, I have a thought.
Nothing comes to
Oh,
mind.
unless you had something first. Well, I originally wanted, had this video gone different, for technological reasons. I wanted to read Romans 1 and talk about it a little bit, but I think that might be more than what we have time for. Um, and so I think, just for those of you who aren't familiar with Romans 1, it talks about a society where,
I don't
actually,
know where
Cody,
you're
do you want to
going.
describe it or should I? Okay. Romans 1 talks about a society where they reject, even though God is obvious through creation, even though he's made himself totally plain in the world, um, people in society have rejected God, and therefore God and said, you know what, never mind God, I'm going to reject him, and therefore God gives them over to a debased mind, to an irrational mind, and lets them fall into all kinds of sins. And in Romans 1, that does include praising homosexual behavior. That doesn't mean that anybody who's ever struggled with that particular sin is under God's curse. By no means. Even good Christians will struggle with any type of temptation. But this is basically people who have rejected God, and so God has given over to a debased mind. And you really kind of look around at society and kind of see that, where um, we have these silly nonsense ideas about evolution that really don't stand up to the actual facts of biology. Like a lot of what you see in a paleontology museum does not line up with actual paleontology. Um, you have it where you'll find bones in Africa that are in mixed bone beds, where you'll have alligator bones, zebra bones, ape bones, and human bones, and they're like, oh well, these human bones and ape bones must go together and be one creature, when there's not really evidence for that. And so I really want, so as a society, even though we know internally that God is real and God is there, we've rejected him. And I really wonder if it really seems like you look out at society and how irrational people are being, and how they're promoting like children being transgender and all this other nonsense. And you really wonder if society is under like a willful delusion, or if partly we're under God's judgment.
Well, I'll tell you
Like,
Paul's
what are your
thoughts on
thoughts
it.
on that?
It says that the wrath of God is revealed against heaven, or revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men, who by their unrighteousness suppress the truth. For what can be known about God is plain to them, because God has shown it to them, for his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world and the things that have been made. So they are without excuse. I believe this. If you're one of my friends who is an atheist, I believe this, that this is sufficient evidence for the existence of God and for understanding enough about his character to understand that we are all under moral judgment. Therefore, you are a liar if you say that there's no God and that you have no sin. For although they knew God, they did not honor God as God or give thanks to him. But they became futile in their thinking, and their foolish hearts were darkened. And that's what you described, Greg. And at the end of this, we see the saddest part is that though they knew God's righteous decree, that those who practice such things deserve to die. And I don't mean that politically, but in terms of if you were standing in front of God, you would deserve to die. They not only do them, but they give approval to those who practice them. And that's the direction of our society, is not only that you are being told you should give approval, you're being told that you must give approval to these things. And we're here to say, as long as we have access to an audience over Facebook, over Google, or in person, or from a platform of any kind, we're here to say that there is such thing as right and wrong, and God defines it. And we don't approve because God doesn't approve, and we're not going to.
Yeah, and it's of course that doesn't mean we hate anybody. Like, people have this idea that if we don't approve particular behavior, that means we must hate people. And far be it from that. Like, I'm not going to say that I've never hated any particular person, because that is something that God needs to work on in my heart. But like, when I saw like Osama bin Laden, for example, I used to pray for his salvation, even though this was the most evil person in the world. I guess I would still pray for him to be safe. But when he was killed, I was like, I'm happy that that we can be relieved of this burden.
Yeah, God is glorified in bringing people to him as well as in punishing those who reject him. And one of the reasons that we can say what we're saying credibly is because we're not being hypocrites. We're not claiming that we deserve any better. Or it's only because of what Jesus did on the cross that anyone is able to be saved from their own self, their own sin. And so, yeah, there's no like, oh, we're better than you. It's, oh, we've been fed and you have not been fed, and this is where you can get the bread. And Jesus calls himself the bread of life, right? And he calls himself the everlasting water. That when he talks to the woman at the well, that there's water that it never runs dry, and that's eternal life. We don't believe that people stop existing the way the typical materialist perspective goes. So I know that's a lot, but if I could put a bow on it, there's the issue.
Go for it.
Okay. The issue is that
I'll let you get going in about a minute. But
the issue is that the world has gone mad, and Greg, you're right to point out Romans 1. This is how it's gone mad. This is why it's gone mad, and this is the solution. It's Jesus Christ and the gospel.
And Jesus himself said, a lot of people will try to say, well, there's lots of ways to God, but Jesus said that he's the only way to the Father. And you can say what you want about Jesus. People are free to believe what they want. They're free to believe anything, but that doesn't make it true. It doesn't mean that what you believe lines up with the evidence. You can believe anything about God based on your feelings. You can believe anything about somebody's guilt based on your feelings. But I know for me and Cody, like, we believe in Christian faith because of evidence, both evidence of what we've seen in our own lives and other people's lives, and also evidence we see from facts and from apologetics. So I can look at history, I can look at biology, and say, that clearly there is a God. And I know in the 20th century, the greatest atheist philosopher of the 20th century ended up becoming a believer in God because of his study of DNA. And for those of you who maybe you have an engineering background or maybe you're an atheist, I recommend looking up bacterial flagellum. That we can spell that in the comments if you want, but bacteria have been discovered to have an actual motor, an outboard motor inside of their cell walls. And this is, or I should say in their cell membranes. I'm not sure how it's actually, if it's embedded to the cell wall itself. Bacteria are kind of weird with their external anatomy. Anyway, I digress on this. You have an outboard motor inside of bacteria. And this is more sophisticated than any motor human beings have ever been able to build. And it's not a metaphor. And it is an actual literal motor. And it works in pretty much the same way as the motor in your car. The biggest difference being that it's made out of protein. So it's made out of just a different material instead of being made of metal. And it uses a proton gradient instead of an electrical gradient. But it's more sophisticated than what's in your car. So this did not happen by evolution. This did not happen slowly and gradually. Now, if you could show me in a lab and prove that this could happen naturally, great. But if you were walking along the beach and you found a boat, and you might say, well, maybe the bark, bent and folded into the shape. Okay, what about the motor? So I guess I'll let Cody wrap up the video. I'm gonna get going, Cody, because I got a friend who I told him I was gonna meet up with them, and actually,
cool. Thanks for talking.
So I should probably
anyone has comments, questions, we'll try and respond to those. So go ahead and in the comment section. To see you guys on our next video.